Okay, just confirming the live stream is up. Okay, live stream is good. At this time, will sergeants please start their recordings? PC recording has started.
According to the cloud, all set.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Veterans jointly with General Welfare. At this time, would all council members and staff please turn on their video? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent mode. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. We are ready to begin.
Good afternoon. I am Councilmember Robert Holden, Chair of the New York City Council's Committee on Veterans. And I want to thank all of you for attending this important joint hearing with the General Welfare Committee on the city's efforts to end veterans' homelessness. During the 1970s, my generation saw the end result of a city and a country that neglected our veterans. Rampant homelessness and drug use plagued the veteran community. We've come a long way since the Vietnam War in how we treat veterans. Nevertheless, the transition from military life to civilian life remains challenging, even for the post 9/11 veterans generation. We are here today to better understand which programs and services are succeeding in helping veterans and in what areas we can do better. Last week, I visited the Borden Avenue Veterans Shelter in Long Island City, and I can tell you the staff is very committed to the well-being of homeless veterans. However, they need more resources and attention from city agencies. The food situation for our veterans has deteriorated significantly. And I brought some food back to show you here today, and I'll do that in a few minutes. But it's not much for an adult man to eat, and from what every single veteran that I spoke to says, the food tastes worse than it looks. For veterans who are suffering from depression, unemployment, and substance abuse, having a good meal can go a long way towards having a positive day. It can affect a veteran's attitude on job interviews and housing appointment. And it's not just about the taste and nutritional value, but the positive mental attitude a good meal can create. My office is going to work with not-for-profits and the nonprofits and city agencies to improve the food situation at the Borden Avenue shelter. While visiting the shelter, I also saw a better model on how shelters can be structured. Many veterans are not in an open area, but rather have an open air room with a door that remains unlocked. It creates a level of privacy that is preferred by veterans. It's like a modular unit. After speaking with veterans at the shelter, having this privacy helps maintain their dignity and fosters a more positive environment. It's a model DHS should look at for all homeless individuals. In addition to our oversight topic, we'll also be hearing Resolution 21-2022, sponsored by Councilmember Dinowitz, reaffirming New York City status as a Purple Heart City and calling on the state legislature to pass and the governor to sign legislation designating the state of New York a Purple Heart State. We'll also be hearing Resolution 41-2022 calling on Congress to pass and the president to sign legislation that allows service members, veterans, and eligible surviving spouses to use the Department of Veterans home loans to purchase a co-op apartment, which is long overdue. In December 2015, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and the Department of Veterans Affairs notified New York City that it had effectively ended chronic homelessness among veterans, signifying that all known chronically homeless veterans had either been housed or were on an immediate path to permanent housing. In 2016, HUD found that there were 527 sheltered homeless veterans and 32 unhoused veterans, a 66% reduction from 3 years earlier. And the de Blasio administration credits this reduction with the city's focused efforts to identify and track all homeless veterans, expanding affordable housing stock, connecting veterans with voucher programs, and implementing incentives for brokers and landlords to rent to veterans. While this is a landmark achievement, our work is not done. According to the latest DHS figures, in January of this year, there were 203 persons residing in our city's veterans shelters. However, total veteran count remains much higher because of many of our city's veterans are not living in a dedicated veteran shelter or unhoused altogether. We also have an unknown number of veterans who are at risk for homelessness, veterans who have substance abuse issues, veterans who are in danger of being evicted due to an inability to pay rent, and veterans that are not captured in the point in time count. Today, my aim is to investigate how we can expand successful programs like the Veterans Peer Coordinator Initiative, build on federal partnership of the HUD-VASH voucher program, and extend outreach and preventative services to those at risk of homelessness. I believe outreach is an essential component to resolving this crisis. DVS and DHS services must be accessible to all veterans. I'm concerned that DVS virtual platforms deter our seniors veterans from getting the help that they desperately need, and that DVS is not adequately staffed to fund or meet this challenge. Our veterans deserve quality case management from trained staff professionals to help them navigate federal and local bureaucracies. I look forward to working with DVS to ensure that the agency has the resources it needs to help our most vulnerable veterans. And I want to thank the Veterans Committee staff for their help in putting this hearing together. Committee Counsel Bianca Vitale, Policy Analyst Elizabeth Arts, and Senior Finance Analyst Sebastian Bacci, as well as my staff, Chief of Staff Daniel Cazina and Legislative Director Craig Caruana. Now I want to turn over to my colleague and good friend, Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, Chair of the City Council's General Welfare Committee, to deliver her opening statement. I'm joined by fellow council members Brewer, Dinowitz, Osei, Palladino, Stevens, Hudson, Nurse, Areola, Riley, Ung, Ressler, Lee, and Williams. Over to you, Chair Ayala.
Thank you, Chair Holden. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, Chair of the Council's Committee on General Welfare. Today, I am joining my colleague, Councilmember Holden, to hold a hearing on veteran homelessness in New York City. It is undeniable that we are still in the midst of a homeless crisis in this city, one that has been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have an obligation to protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers and to prevent homelessness from happening to begin with, including among our veteran population. Many veterans in New York City are considered at risk of homelessness because of poverty, lack of support from family and friends, substance use or mental health issues, and precarious living conditions. Veterans experience high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and sexual trauma, all which can lead to higher risk of homelessness. According to recent estimates, on a single night in January of 2019, the number of veterans experiencing homelessness in New York State was 1,270. Of that total, an estimated 684 were in New York City. More than 90% of veterans experiencing homelessness identified as male, 8.7% identified as female, and 0.3% identified as transgender. In addition to living in shelters, many veterans live in our streets. I would like to understand better what the Department of Homeless Services is doing to support veterans experiencing homelessness on the streets from the very first point of contact at outreach. We will be having a special hearing on unsheltered homelessness in New York City at the end of this month, but I want to underscore that sweeps are both inhumane and ineffective. We must do better for New Yorkers experiencing homelessness. I am also interested in learning what the city is doing to provide wraparound services to veterans who may be experiencing mental health issues or substance use, and what the city is doing to provide meaningful pathways to permanent housing for veterans. Housing is a human right. We need to make sure that we are taking a multi-pronged approach to ensure that every New Yorker has access to safe, permanent, and affordable housing. Thank you to the advocates, members of the public, and those with lived experience who are with us today. Thank you to representatives from the administration for joining us. I look forward to hearing from you all on these critical issues. In addition to the Veterans Committee, I would like to thank my committee staff who worked to prepare this hearing. Aminta Kilowan, Senior Counsel, Crystal Pond, Senior Policy Analyst, Julia Haramis, Finance Analyst, Rose Martinez, Senior Data Scientist, Ben Witt, Data Scientist, and my Deputy Chief of Staff, Michelle Cruz. Thanks again, Councilmember Holden. I'd also like to recognize that we have been joined by members of the committee, the General Welfare Committee, Council members Riley, Stevens, Ung, Lee, Williams, Ressler, Hudson, and Osei. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Ayala. We've also,
Caban, sorry, Councilwoman Caban.
Caban, yeah, I was just about to mention her. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. So I'll now turn it over to Councilmember Dinowitz to deliver remarks on the resolution he is sponsoring.
Thank you, Chair. I very much appreciate you giving me the time to speak on Resolution 21. I actually had the honor to serve as chair of this very committee last year, and it was very humbling to engage with so many of our veterans. Now, Resolution 21 will honor a specific group of our veterans, the veterans who have earned the Purple Heart. These veterans have been wounded or have been killed so that the rest of us can live in relative peace and comfort. In 2015, the City Council actually declared New York City a Purple Heart City. So this resolution not only reaffirms that commitment to our veterans who have earned the Purple Heart, but it also calls on the state legislature to pass and the governor to sign Senate Bill 2279, Assembly Bill 7961 to make New York State a Purple Heart State. It is very important that we honor our heroes with this designation. It signifies that New York City is welcoming and appreciative and indebted to our veterans who were wounded or killed, keeping the rest of us safe. And it is time the entirety of our state recognizes that sacrifice, which is why I introduced this resolution and why I am asking my fellow council members to support and sign on to Resolution 21. And I just want to again thank Chair Holden, of course, Chair Ayala, and of course to the committee staff, Bianca Vitali and Elizabeth Arts for their incredible work on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dinowitz. And I'll now turn it over to Senior Counsel for the General Welfare Committee, Aminta Kilowan, to go over some procedural matters for this hearing.
Thank you, Chair Holden and Chair Ayala and Councilmember Dinowitz. I am Aminta Kilowan, Senior Counsel for the Committee on General Welfare of the New York City Council. I will be moderating today's hearing. Before we begin, I want to go over a few procedural matters. I will be calling on panelists to testify. I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called, and then you will be unmuted by the host. Please listen for your name to be called. For everyone testifying today, please note that there may be a few seconds of delay before you are unmuted, and we thank you for your patience with that. At today's hearing, the first panel will be comprised of members of the administration, followed by council member questions, and then members of the public will testify. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and you will be called upon in order of when you raise your hand. I will now call on members of the administration to testify. DVS Assistant Commissioner Jason Loughran, DVS Director of Housing Dana Rock, Deputy Commissioner of Adult Services at DSS Iris Rodriguez, and Assistant Commissioner of Adult Families, Veterans, and Special Services Sonia Russell. I will first read the oath, and after I will call on each panelist representing the administration to individually respond. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Assistant Commissioner Loughran?
I do.
Thank you. Director Rock?
I do.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner Rodriguez?
I do.
Thank you. And finally, Assistant Commissioner Russell?
I do.
Thank you. Assistant Commissioner Rock, you may begin when ready if you're the one who's going to be speaking first for the administration. Otherwise, we can begin with Deputy Commissioner Iris Rodriguez.
Hello, I'll begin today. Good afternoon, Deputy Speaker Ayala and Chair Holden, members of the committee and advocates. My name is Jason Lochran, and I'm proud to serve as the Assistant Commissioner of Community Affairs for the New York City Department of Veteran Services. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dana Rock, who is our Director of Housing. Thank you for providing us with the opportunity to discuss DVS's efforts in partnership with our sister agencies on addressing veteran homelessness. Following my testimony, we welcome any questions that committee members may have. Veteran homelessness is one of the most critical issues that DVS works on. It has been a central focus of our work since before our inception as an agency, back when our department used to operate as the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs. In June 2014, former First Lady Michelle Obama announced the federal government's mayoral challenge to end veteran homelessness, an effort that the city of New York immediately became actively involved in. Since accepting the challenge 8 years ago, DVS has made remarkable progress in significantly reducing veteran homelessness. In collaboration with the New York City Continuum of Care, veteran-focused nonprofits and our fellow city agencies, New York City launched Mission Home Veterans, a city-based initiative to end veteran homelessness. New York became the largest city in the country to participate in this initiative. This effort represented the city's deep commitment to provide the necessary services, support, and housing needed for veterans experiencing homelessness. The growth of this effort also coincided with DVS becoming a full city agency, enabling us to serve as a national model for how cities and local government can offer comprehensive and holistic services to veterans. Assisting veterans who are experiencing homelessness is one of the foundational pillars of this agency. Since the start of our Housing and Support Services program in 2016, DVS has assisted a total of 1,056 veterans with their moves into permanent or supportive housing. My colleague, the Department of Homeless Services Deputy Commissioner Iris Rodriguez, will provide you with more extensive details on the services and resources that DHS provides. I will discuss the extensive array of support services that DVS provides to veterans, many of which have been integral to addressing veteran homelessness in a holistic way. The primary DVS staff who work with veterans experiencing homelessness are in the Community Affairs Unit, which make up approximately a third of our agency staff. This unit provides care coordination and assists with critical veteran services, such as disability claims. We have 7 staff who are specifically dedicated to housing and support services, 5 veteran peer coordinators, also known as a VPC, a veteran housing specialist who is responsible for the recruitment of housing stock, and my colleague Dana Rock, who serves as their team leader. The majority of our VPCs are veterans themselves, and they work peer-to-peer to build relationships and help clients navigate New York City's complex housing process. The VPCs serve as advocates, ensuring veterans are informed throughout the housing process and have everything they need, including but not limited to providing support to help veterans and their families assess and prepare for viable housing options, advocating on behalf of veterans and their families with landlords and management companies, transportation to and from apartment viewings, housing application assistance, broker and landlord introductions, unit inspection assistance, facilitation of one-shot deal requests, and referrals for furniture. Our goals are to help veterans understand the benefits they are eligible for, ensure the connection to the benefits occurs, and to identify a housing opportunity that is an appropriate fit. Our team leverages existing subsidy programs and community resources to match veterans to the right level of care and support they need. Our office leverages programs such as the federally funded HUD-VASH vouchers administered through the Veterans Administration, support services for veteran families, SSVFs, city subsidies such as SODA and CityFEPs, and various levels of supportive housing to provide our constituency with an array of housing options. HUD-VASH is a collaborative program that pairs HUD's housing voucher program, rental assistance with VA case management and supportive services. These services are designed to help homeless veterans and their families find and sustain permanent housing and access to healthcare, mental health treatment, substance use counseling, and other supports necessary to help them in their recovery process and with their ability to maintain housing in the community. If veterans are ineligible for services through the VA, it can leave many experiencing homelessness without access to housing subsidies or case management. As such, in 2017, DVS piloted a program to fill this critical gap in services for those who are ineligible due to their length of service or type of discharge. The rental subsidy HUD-VASH Continuum was created and administered by the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA, DVS, and our community partners to provide case management along with a Housing Choice Section 8 voucher to this subset of particularly vulnerable clients. This program was piloted with an initial 100 vouchers and was continued to grow each year. Since the program began, DVS has housed 259 veterans with this specific subsidy. As always, careful and compassionate case management is provided by our veteran peer coordinators. In addition, assistance does not end with when a veteran is housed. Because DVS also provides wraparound aftercare services to ensure our veteran clients remain stably housed. In fact, all veterans housed by DVS have access to VPCs and aftercare follow-up services to ensure there is a connection to critical services during this time of transition and recovery. Services include check-in calls over the course of 24 months after placement, and referrals to community partners who provide mental health, employment, and other support resources. In coordination with DHS, DVS also works with four federal grantees known as SSVFs, Support Services for Veteran Families, to place our veterans into their new permanent homes. These organizations include Help USA, Jericho, Services for the Underserved, and Volunteers of America. In addition to providing permanent housing solutions to our homeless veterans, DVS also offers information about affordable housing and home ownership opportunities. I invite the community to visit nyc.gov/vethousing. Again, nyc.gov/vethousing to find a comprehensive resource guide that includes information about utility bill assistance, a list of donation centers that offer clothing and household goods, and an eviction prevention frequently asked questions page to assist veterans who are in danger of eviction. Another key feature on this page is our Housing Ladder, which is a resource that provides access to housing information for veterans at every stage of their housing journey. It includes information about NYCHA, Veterans Mitchell-Lama Preference, senior housing, the VA home loan, and the Veterans Property Tax Exemption. Our agency also advocated at the federal level for the VA home loan to be approved for the purchase of co-op shares. New York City is unique in that much of our housing stock exists within cooperative dwellings. And we believe that purchasing a co-op is an affordable pathway for our veterans to become first-time home buyers. We strongly support any policies that allow for the VA home loan to be used for this type of lending here in New York City. While our housing numbers are a measure of our staff's work and dedication, it is the individual lives that are impacted that are greatest wins. I would like to share the story of a veteran we housed in October 2020. He is a U.S. Army veteran with an other than honorable discharge that we began working with in April of 2020. The veteran at the time of intake was struggling with substance abuse, and he ended up leaving shelter to enter a treatment facility to receive help. The VPC remained in contact with him throughout this treatment, and upon his release, DVS was able to secure him a HUD-VASH Continuum voucher. Our VPC assisted the veteran by finding special housing in Queens that also offered on-site social services. The veteran has since been in touch with our aftercare team, and during his 10-month check-in call, we learned that he was recertifying and renewing his lease for another year. Another example of our work includes a referral we received from a shelter partner in July 2020 for a 63-year-old Air Force veteran who was requesting help in identifying a rental unit that would allow him to use his HUD-VASH voucher. He was assigned to a VPC to support in his housing search, and subsequently several apartment viewings were set up for him. He was accepted to a one-bedroom unit in Manhattan and was able to move into his new home in under 90 days from when he first completed intake with our office. We had his 18th month check-in and just last week, and he reported how well he was doing in his home. Here's a quote from a letter that this grateful veteran sent to the VPC who helped him. No sooner had she listened to some of my journey that she referred me to housing options, explaining to me the differences in the different programs that at the time seemed to be a maze and mosaic that were confusing, especially while under duress. These are just a few examples of the impact that our staff and community partners have on the lives of the veterans we serve. DVS takes great pride in our efforts to ensure that those who have served our country do not face homelessness and get the assistance and support they need to rebuild and thrive. Housing and support services are just a small piece of the comprehensive care and resources that we offer to our community. When it comes to providing services and referrals, our care coordination team focuses on core areas, including but not limited to VA disability claims, benefits navigation support, funeral honors, food assistance, and health and wellness referrals. Our claims team has also been accredited by the New York State Division of Veteran Services to process claims related to disability compensation, survivor's pension, indemnity dependency compensation, and education. Since July 2020, DVS has successfully actioned 226 claim submissions, the vast majority of which involved a claim of disability. Only 14.9% of New York City veterans currently receive disability compensation, and we believe the numbers of those who are eligible may be much higher. Through increased outreach, we are confident that we will connect more New York City veterans, including those who are homeless or recently housed, to VA disability compensation. Providing employment, training, and educational opportunities to all veterans is a vital part of our mission, and it is especially critical for veterans experiencing homelessness. One of the main reasons that people end up homeless is a lack of steady income, chronic or prolonged unemployment, and poverty. Some veterans also face the added challenge of having difficulty re-entering the job market after they have returned from service. It is estimated that there are about 20,485 veterans who are unemployed, which represents approximately 13.5% of the total New York City veteran population. For comparison, the overall unemployment rate in New York City was approximately 12% by the end of fiscal year 20. DVS launched VetConnect Pro, a first-in-the-nation employment tool designed to connect veteran job seekers to employment opportunities in the public and private sectors to address this community need. In addition, our care coordinators work with trusted referral partners such as Workforce One and other community nonprofits to connect our vets with employment support that is culturally competent and effective. Last, I would like to bring your attention to a community event that DVS will be participating in with the Fuller Center this summer. This event is called the Furniture Build-a-thon. DVS and the Fuller Center will team up to recruit volunteers who will help assemble handmade furniture for our recently housed veterans. We are in the process of confirming dates and locations and invite members of the committee and advocates present at today's hearing to volunteer with us in this effort. This project is an excellent way to show your support, build community, and give back to our veteran neighbors. In closing, I'd like to thank our veteran clients for continuing to inspire our team with the resilience, selflessness, and compassion that they display throughout our communities. We firmly believe that anyone who has served our nation should never experience homelessness or housing insecurity. Please know that our agency stands ready to support and connect you to the care you rightfully deserve. It is an honor and privilege to serve all of you, and I thank you for allowing me to testify before you today. We are pleased to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Loughran. Over now to representatives of the Department of Social Services.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Committee on General Welfare and Veterans and Chairs Ayala and Holden for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Iris Rodriguez, and I am the Deputy Commissioner for Adult Services in the Department of Homeless Service. I am joined by my colleague here, Sonia Russell, who's the Assistant Commissioner for Adult Family, Veteran, and Special Services, along with Jason Longhart, Assistant Commissioner for Community Affairs at the New York City Department of Veterans Service, who just spoke. We look forward to updating the committee today on the work that the Adams administration and DHS and our partners are doing to support veterans who may be experiencing homelessness. New York City's veterans are individuals who made the brave choice of protecting our nation above all, and it is our collective responsibility to ensure that they are stably housed and connected. Connected to the resources they need to thrive. DHS continues to do its part in supporting our veterans, and we are proud of the progress that we and our colleagues in and out of state of government are making in reducing the veterans' homelessness. From the onset, the Adams administration and DSS-DHS have made alleviating veterans' homelessness a top priority, with the goal of better serving and supporting those who served our nation and who may be experiencing challenges re-entering civilian life. Thanks to the aggressive rehousing efforts in close coordination with the New York City Department of Veterans Services, we have reduced the number of veterans experiencing homelessness in New York City by nearly 70% since 2014, when we had 1,650 veterans to now 542 in 2021. And we won't rest until every New Yorker who has served our country in the military has an affordable home to live. Looking at the population of veterans experiencing homelessness in New York City, as of this month, we have 398 in DHS facilities. In addition, 5 that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We're pleased to share that from 2014 through 2021, we have placed 4,913 veterans into housing, which includes 1,130 veterans who have exited shelter through the U.S. Department of HUD, Department of Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing, also known as the HUD-VASH program, which provides comprehensive case management services to vulnerable veterans and as well as rental assistance. This progress can be attributed to the work of our dedicated staff, as well as our partnership with DVS and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and the service providers. DHS operates a short-term veteran residency called Borden Avenue Veterans Residency. The Borden Avenue residence is located in Long Island City in Queens, and it provides transitional housing for 104 veterans in grant per diem and 71 veterans in DHS program shelters. The Institute for Community Living serves as the provider and began as the VA grant per diem program, which helps fund transitional housing for veterans up to 24 months to address veterans' needs. Borden has a nurse practitioner and many clinical staff on site to address clients' medical, mental health, and substance abuse needs. To further support veterans, there is an Article 28 clinic right next to Borden, where medical and dental services are provided to our veterans and many community members. As with overall service approach, prevention is a key piece of our strategy in addressing veterans' homelessness. As valuable as temporary emergency shelter can be for families and individuals with no housing option, a shelter should not be considered a home. Building on this approach, DHS places prevention efforts at the front foot of our agency goals, with the aim of keeping vulnerable New Yorkers in stable housing environments through multiple neighborhood services, of which have been tailored to meet the needs of our veterans. To carry out this vision, focus on prevention service, the Human Resource Administration, HRA, has established a home-based program, which is a community-based prevention program that serves as the first point of entry for those who are at risk of becoming homeless. Home-based assists individuals and families in overcoming immediate housing instability that could result in homelessness, while also helping clients develop plans for longer-term stability. Our home-based staff across the 5 boroughs are available to evaluate the specific needs of their clients and offer several services to help New Yorkers secure housing stability, including services for eviction prevention, assisting and accessing public assistance, emergency rental assistance, job placement, education assistance, relocation assistance, and short-term financial assistance. Specifically, to help veterans, DHS has supported programs at the Richwood Bushwick Senior Citizen Council Home Base, which targets and support veterans in the community who have experienced homelessness and are at risk of displacement. Through this program, our staff creates profiles for veterans who are at risk of reentering shelter, so we can monitor their needs before their circumstances become dire. This prevention model helps us ensure veterans have the resources and support they need to remain stably housed in their neighborhood. Additionally, to further our prevention service approach, we're implementing our rapid rehousing program to support veterans who are either newly entering the shelter system or re-entering it. This program model has slight variations from the standard prevention measures, as it focuses on veterans entering shelter and provides enhanced service. This program provides veterans with support for finding housing, rental assistance, moving costs, case management. The goal is to ensure that any veteran entering a shelter can be successfully placed into permanent housing as quickly as possible. We also want to highlight the efforts to prevent homelessness carried out by our assistance agency, HRA, through the Homeless Prevention Administration, HPA. HPA worked with DHS and the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA, and several city agencies and organizations to prevent homelessness and New Yorkers remain stable housed in their neighborhoods. Another important homeless prevention resource for our veterans and for all New Yorkers across our 5 boroughs. In the Department of Social Service Office, we also have our Office of Civil Justice. Through OCJ, tenants of at risk can access free legal representation and advice on issues related to housing eviction, harassment, disrepair, and other housing related issues. As mentioned, these services are free and importantly, available regardless of immigration status. Pivoting to street outreach, DHS is committed to supporting unsheltered veterans, and we're proud of the progress we're making to this front. Due to the effort of our staff and network of providers, we have reduced veteran street homelessness to 5 unsheltered individuals. While these numbers are encouraging, our work to reduce unsheltered veteran population continues each day. We continue to partner with the VA on our street outreach and leverage their coordinated medical services to help individuals on the street. As we previously reported to the council, relationship building is a linchpin of our street outreach efforts, and we're proud of the outreach staff who engage our veterans with patience, care, and compassion as we work to stabilize and bring them indoors. Securing and maintaining housing permanency for our city's veterans is a top priority for the Adams administration. We are committed to finding permanent housing for all the veterans who are currently in our system and ensuring that they have the tools and support to exit our system and remain stably housed moving forward. In 2021, we helped place 341 veterans into subsidized and unsubsidized placements, and the work continues. There are several programs available to help veterans experiencing homeless or at risk of experiencing homeless to secure permanent housing. I would like to briefly walk the committee through these programs, starting with the HUD-VASH program mentioned earlier. Under the HUD-VASH program, eligible low-income veterans receive a Section 8 voucher, as well as case management and supportive service from the VA and community-based outreach clinics, with the goal to being placed veterans in long-term housing. Veterans are connected to HUD-VASH programs by servicing providers referred to DHS through the VSU unit, which in turn refers veterans to the VA Medical Center, where individuals are assessed for eligibility. Once deemed eligible, the housing vouchers are administered by the New York City Housing Authority and New York City Housing Preservation and Development to help veterans access public, subsidized, and private market housing. This program partnership has proven successful and continues to help veterans experiencing homeless in our city locate stable permanent housing. We also recognize that in order to increase our veterans' placement in housing, we must also partner closely with property owners across the 5 boroughs to find suitable homes for our clients, to encourage landlords to rent their apartments to our veterans in need. The city launched the Mission Home Program, which recruits property owners to rent their units to our veterans. With appropriate military discharge status, veterans are able to access HUD vouchers as well as support services from veteran families, which is also called as SSVF, which provides supportive service designated to promote housing stability, including access to benefit, cash assistance, housing court advocacy, job training, and employment to low-income veteran families or individuals either residing in shelter or transitioning to permanent housing. We also want to highlight the opportunity available to veterans through our rental assistance program. For instance, when veterans enter, they're exempt from the 90-day shelter stay requirement to qualify for our city FIPS rental assistance voucher, and veterans are also prioritized for our emergency housing vouchers, EHV, which is a program made available through the American Rescue Plan Act to assist individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of experiencing homeless in finding housing. As we close, we want to emphasize several key takeaways from our testimony. The Adams administration is committed to using every tool at our disposal and leaving no stone unturned to house veterans experiencing homeless. That is the least we could do to express our gratitude for their service and commitment to our nation. It takes a village to support our veterans experiencing homeless, from the federal level all the way to the local providers in our neighborhood. And we must all share the responsibility to properly shelter and house our unhoused neighbors. We remain committed to serving our veterans experiencing homeless with the care and compassion they deserve and partnering with City Council on these efforts. Thank you, and we welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, and thank you to all members of the administration for your testimony. I will now turn it over to Chair Holden for questions.
Thank you both for your testimony, and thank you for mentioning the number of veterans in 2021 entering permanent housing. I guess this is for DHS. Can you give us an understanding if those numbers are an improvement from the past or about the same?
We've reduced veterans homelessness by over 70% since we started the efforts of reducing, ensuring all veterans are housed. Back in 2014, we had, like I mentioned previously, a little over 1,650. We're down now to 542. So that has been a 70% decrease.
So are we placing veterans into housing faster than the number of veterans entering the shelter?
I want to say that our prevention service at the front door, coupled with the placements that are coming, I don't have the exact number of how many folks are entering at the front door. We could definitely get back to you, but the numbers have been reduced. So I want to say that it is coupled with front door prevention and diversion efforts where we have at all our intake, and it coupled with permanent exit with support with subsidized housing that we have towards the back door.
Yeah, so how does DHS define exit to permanent housing? What is permanent housing? How do you define that?
Exit to permanent housing is those individuals that we are able to place using subsidies. So we have several subsidies, like I mentioned earlier, HUD-VASH, we have VASH Continuum, and we have CityFEPS. And in addition, we also partner with our SSVF providers who provide short-term assistance to move clients. So when we say we're placing people into housing, it is into an apartment or a room where they have an actual lease.
Okay, so can you give us a breakdown of how many female homeless veterans versus male homeless veterans?
I don't have the exact number, but I could tell you that our population, 90% is male versus 10% being female.
Okay, are there any unique services for female veterans? Because it looks like they're going into just regular shelters, not veteran shelters, right? The female veterans.
So we have two, our female veterans fall under single adults, and they also fall under families with children. While in our single adult system, we have most of them concentrated at one location. Specifically for veterans, females, in the families with children, they're not. The way we place our families with children, we place them based on the youngest child school. So if a female veteran is coming in and their child goes to school in the Bronx, we will make an effort to place them closer to their school.
So how many are we talking about, veterans, female veterans with children? Do we have a number that are seeking shelter?
As of last week, March 31st, it was 31 families with children. Out of those 31, I cannot for certain, I will get back to you to tell you how many of those were with a female head of household.
Okay.
But our number of female applying with a veteran in the family member is 31.
Okay, how many new homeless veterans are entering the shelter system each year? Do you have a number on that?
No, I do not, sir. I would definitely get back to you.
All right, can we get that?
Sure.
And what are, there are some notable trends among homeless veterans population in New York City? Like, are there notable trends like, age, that we're seeing a different age population, time in service, unsheltered versus sheltered, disability rating? Can you break that down as to any notable trends we're seeing?
We will have to get back to you also with that data.
All right.
Chair, I think,
Go ahead.
sorry to interject here, but
All
Chair,
right.
we can kind of give you some broad level demographic that can kind of give you an idea. Statistically, the veteran population does have a higher probability of disabilities than the non-homeless, non-veteran population. In addition to that, as Iris mentioned, the majority of our homeless veterans are males, single males, for which we are confident that the majority of them are in the Borden Avenue shelter system, because that is the shelter that meets those criteria for single males. As far as the length of stay and that data, we can get back to you on that.
But do you like the catalyst for homelessness differ based on the service era? For example, according to the National Center for PTSD, 30% of Vietnam vets experience PTSD compared to 12% of Desert Storm veterans. So I don't know, either of you, can you explain what factors are driving homelessness among the different generations of New York City veterans?
We can get back to you with more specific trends, but as you mentioned, 70% of our veteran population is 55 years or older. So we're confident that there must be some underlying trends or additional trends that are associated with war era and the more elderly population of veterans.
Right. Okay. Has DHS implemented Executive Order 65, which requires all city agencies to adopt a standard veteran indicator question on their intake forms?
Yes, sir. Everyone that comes through our front door and everyone that is encountered through our street outreach team is asked that question. So once you come in,
right, you're doing it, but are the other agencies doing it?
DHS is doing it, and I want to say that we work closely with DVS and with HRA. So that question is being asked. Anyone that comes through our front door, whether it be families with children, adult families, or single adults, it is one of the questions that is asked, because it also leads us to have a by name list so we could identify early in the process who they are and how to better serve them.
Yeah, can we get a copy of that form?
The form that we complete at intake?
Yes.
Sure.
Just want to, because we want to also make sure that other city agencies are doing that. And I'm sure we'll find some agencies that are not doing that. So that's why I think we need to, somebody needs to check that. So does DHS track the services veterans are receiving separate from city services? So, for example, does DHS know if a veteran is working with a nonprofit for housing using a supportive services for veterans families, SSVF grant, or if a veteran is researching or searching for employment with an organization federally funded through the Homeless Veterans program, the HVRP grant, what is that? HVRP grant.
So one of the things that happened several years ago is that DHS, in collaboration with non-for-profit and other city agencies, created, and I'm just going to start and then pass it along to Jason since he wanted to talk about this platform. We created a platform where city agencies, non-for-profits, the VA share one mutual platform for all our veterans that are in our system and in their system. And one of the things it does is it gives us the ability to have a by name list. It gives us the ability to know what housing we're going to be working with for that individual, the VA is able to tell us whether their VA status, whether they are a vet or not, whether they're honorable, dishonorable, or non-honorable. And it also gives us the ability to, amongst different agencies like HPD, HRA, DHS, DVS, know the services that we're working. So when I say we work and we have a by name list, that was one of the platforms that was created. And it was to have continuation of service amongst several city agencies and non-for-profit holders. Jason, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this a little bit more, so I'll pass it to you to talk, how we're all using it to better serve our veterans in the community.
Thank you, Iris. I think the Deputy Commissioner handled that and expressed that pretty clearly in that I think this is a really strong and bright spot as we define collaboration in city government and our partners outside of city government, such as the SSVFs that we mentioned and some of the folks that are that are going to testify today. It's that collaborative approach that helped us accomplish our goals in reducing veteran homelessness by 70% from as mentioned earlier. And so when you really think about how do we accomplish such a large task like reducing veteran homelessness by that percentage, it really comes with not only the buy-in from the community and the buy-in from legislators like yourselves and committee members here, but also technology. How do we speak to one another and be transparent about the services that these folks are being connected with to move the needle? And so that's why I wanted to highlight this today as such a strong, bright spot for collaboration and success in city government and for the veteran homeless population, because it's that type of success that we often look back at and say, how can we do this with other initiatives and other challenges our community is facing? So I just wanted to double down on what Iris said, and that we're very proud of that initiative and how it's helped us accomplish that very significant reduction in veteran homelessness today.
What was the name of that platform you just mentioned?
It's the DVS by name list, but it's DHS. I'll pass it over to DHS if they.
Well, Mission Home.
Commission Home?
It's a as Jason described, it's a platform based on technology where we share information regarding all our vets amongst different city agencies and the VA and non-for-profit world who service this population. So we all have the ability to look at it and see it in real time.
Okay. I have a few questions on mental health and substance abuse before I move on to just a couple other questions, and I'll turn it over to my co-chair. How many DHS veterans are referred to and enter into a mental health program?
I don't have that exact number on me, but I can tell you that the majority of our homeless veterans do utilize a federal subsidy in the form of HUD-VASH or HUD-VASH Continuum. And with those particular rental assistance programs, they do provide healthcare, mental health treatment, and substance use counseling and other supports necessary to help them in the recovery process and maintain their housing. So we can confidently say that the significant proportion of homeless veterans that we are serving are not only connected with the services they need, but also with the permanent housing assistance they need to maintain a roof over their head. In addition to that, we also provide a percentage of our homeless veterans into supportive housing, which also comes with those wraparound services as well. But I'll pause there and turn it over to my Director of Housing to add any additional comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide those percentages for the types of vouchers and placements that DVS worked with. Last year, approximately 20% of our move-outs went into a supportive housing setting. In addition to that, 64% of our placements were with a HUD-VASH or a VASH Continuum. So that means the majority of our placements moved out with continued support as they made that transition from homelessness to housing.
What percentage of veterans in DHS shelters have a substance abuse issue? Does any agency know that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What percentage of veterans in DHS shelters have a substance abuse issue?
While we don't have the specific number with respect to the percentage, please understand that those individuals who are experiencing issues of substance abuse, we have clinicians on site at our Borden Avenue Veterans Residence, which Deputy Commissioner Rodriguez mentioned earlier. And there are clinicians on site as well as substance abuse counselors and social workers. And if a veteran needs services outside of Borden Avenue, they would submit a referral for that individual to be seen at another location.
Does DVS know the answer? Commissioner?
Yeah, we'd have to get back to you. We have that type of data on our entirety of veterans seeking services. We'd have to parse it out to identify only those that experience homelessness, but we can get it back to you.
Can you guys, 1 second. I mean, I would think somebody would know kind of a number on, how many have substantive, that should be like a kind of the back of your hand, but I'm very surprised that nobody knows like a ballpark number.
Well, Chair, as we expressed, whether it's substance abuse, mental health support, or any type of clinical need, our priority is to get them with the rental assistance program that we mentioned in HUD-VASH and HUD-VASH Continuum, if they're eligible beyond that, and then into that permanent housing setting along with that care. So
Right. Yeah,
we don't dive too deep into the exact data, but we can get it back to you. Our priority is to just get them into that permanent housing. So we can get back to you with that data.
Yeah, but we should have that number for a hearing like this. It's very, very important. I have some questions on my visit to the Borden Avenue Veterans Shelter. I guess it was Friday. I visited really kind of unannounced. And so, I got some interesting observations I'd like to share with you. Prior to the pandemic, the shelter had an excellent relationship with Project Renewal, which provided high quality food to our veterans. Under new management, Project Renewal is out of the food, service, and right now, the food is pretty bad. It's more or less just those little trays. I'll show you what I mean. These little frozen trays. I don't know if you can see. This is what you get. I don't know if you can really see this. They're not much larger than my hand. This is a food. This is what the veterans get, frozen, and they have to heat it in the microwave for the last 2 years. And that was the #1 complaint from the veterans there. So, what steps does DHS take to ensure homeless veterans throughout the city are getting the nutritional meals necessary? Because right now at the Borden Avenue, the food is pretty bad.
Oh, all of our shelters, in addition to Borden Avenue Veterans Residence, we follow the New York City food standards, which has a limit. It limits the caloric intake. It's spread out between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we have to follow the portion size, the percentage of protein, starch, vegetables. So all of our shelters have to follow those food standards. And if a client or a veteran wants a second portion, if there are second portions available, that is allowed.
I mean, have you seen these this so-called nutritious food?
So we also our medical director works hand in hand in help supporting the food standard initiative. So yes, sir.
It's sad. It's sad. We have a full kitchen at Borden that's not being used. And it stopped at the pandemic. So we have a nice kitchen. There's a line to get the fresh food. where they come with trays. That doesn't exist anymore. They get this. They get these little trays. And they're little, believe me. Again, my hand. That and I went out when I went there, and if you guys went there, you'd hear it too from the veterans, because a lot of them got really, really upset that they used to have decent food there. And even the director said, we used to get people loving the food, and now they hate it. And it looked pretty sad. Our veterans deserve better than that. And I'm not just getting on a soapbox here, because I went there on Friday. And that's the number one complaint I got. There's also some other complaints that if a veteran was on crutches, so some of the aides wouldn't help them even carry like a cup of tea. They had to try to carry it with the crutches, which is almost impossible. So I'm just a little concerned about the treatment that they're getting. But let me talk about, because I'm not going to. I mean, I know the food is bad there, and we're going to work to try to reinstate some food service in-house. That means cook fresh meals there and give it to our veterans. And this committee will focus on that. But I also want to go over the look of the shelter. And this is where DHS comes in, because it's very important. It had the Borden Avenue shelter has individual modules that allow veterans to have their own room with a level of privacy, for some only, not the whole shelter. And the program director I spoke to, Sarah Ferraro at Borden, and every veteran that I spoke to says they prefer these rooms to the congregate setting. The congregate setting in the back of the shelter is just guys out in the open sleeping. And just they have to sleep out in the open where they have no privacy. And I even spoke to the mayor about this, and he kind of agrees that these modules are something to look at to benefit the homeless, and not only the veterans, but the VA provided these modules. They're about 8 by 10, and they offer they offer privacy, although you could see in. There's like a sort of a tinted glass. Have you seen these modules?
Yes, we visit our shelters. Yes, I'm fully aware of what you're describing. We have 154 beds under that, and then we have another 100 in what you described, the congregate setting. The total population at Borden is 254 beds.
So why not get these modules for the other veterans in that shelter? And why doesn't DHS provide that?
So, as you mentioned, Chair, most of our facilities are congregate setting. The reason why the 154 have these modules, or how we want to call it, pods, is how it's described with the VA. These are a program that is funded directly by the VA veterans. Those are considered our GPD beds, where clients have to meet certain requirement in order to be eligible to be placed. I'm not sure when you did your tour if you were able to see the VA, who is the one that does this analysis and assessment when a veteran walks in this door, and that's how they are determined who is placed in this location. Part of creating this program required that they actually have these type of modules. Definitely open to working with your office and suggestion, but I did want to wanted to explain why there's the difference between the open bay and the individual modules that you saw last Friday.
Why does DHS prefer the congregate model?
The congregate model has been a model that's been in place for many years of the shelter system.
No, that's not my question. Why do you prefer it over the module?
There is no right or wrong answer here, sir. I want to say
there
that
is a wrong answer when you can't defend the congregate model. The congregate model, and I spoke to the director, and maybe DHS should too, and I spoke to the mayor. The congregate model has a lot more fights in the board and shelter than the private modules. The private modules are inexpensive, 8 by 10s. You can see into them, so there's not total privacy, but there's a lot of privacy compared to the congregate. And that's where the fights are in our shelters, around the city, because people want privacy. Men, women, everybody wants privacy. And we're not calling it a home, because that 8x10 module is not a home, but it feels safer. You can still monitor it. And I have photographs to show you. I showed the mayor. He agrees. I'm not going to speak for him, but I hope to have him on a tour of that. And it's just horrendous that DHS doesn't treat our veterans any differently. I have a Marine that was 9 years in the Marines, and he has to sleep in a congregate setting. He deserves a module, but they all do. All veterans deserve it, to have some level that the United States owes, New York City owes these veterans. And my God, they have to sleep in a congregate shelter under fluorescent lights. I mean, you look at that shelter, the roof is leaking. There's the makeshift little plastic tarps to catch the water. The lighting, it looks like a commercial. I mean, it looks like an office, not a somewhere where you feel at least some sense of humanity there with this fluorescent lighting that would drive anyone nuts in that place. So we need to do a little bit more, and we can do simple things by bringing them decent food, by cooking it on site, to a module that would at least give them some sense that they're an individual and not just thrown into a big room with other men that they don't know. So I'm asking DHS to start investing a little bit in the Borden, and to come up with some better facilities where they could feel like human beings, our veterans. And before I go any further, though, I just think that you should look at the module and the cooking and just the lighting in that Borden, and visit it more often. Visit it to the point where, if you looked at yourself in that position, if you looked at yourself, what would you prefer? The congregate, where you're just one of many, or at least a module, inexpensive module, 8x10, but there's nice storage in there. There's a small bed, but at least like you feel like you're an individual. And I would like for you to say that at least you'll look at it.
Yes, sir. We will work and look at it.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back to my co-chair, Diana Ayala, for her line of questioning.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I just want to echo what Councilmember Holden said. I mean, I think this is year 2022. Congregate settings no longer work, whether you're a veteran or a single person. They just don't work. And we're seeing the results of that with larger number of individuals choosing to sleep on the streets and on our city subways because they don't work. So I'm hoping that, somewhere along the lines of this administration's tenure, that we're able to come to some sort of a resolution. Obviously, we rather have permanent housing than shelters, but in the event, and we have to be realistic, that we do need shelter beds, then the preference would always be that they not be in a congregate setting. They just simply do not work. But I have a number of questions. So in regards to veteran clients, so when a veteran client comes in need of shelter, do they have to do the intake via the Bellevue site? What is the
So we have 4 points of intake depending. If they're male, yes, they come in through 30th Street. If they're female, we have 2 points of intake, one in Brooklyn, which is HWC, and one in Bronx, which is Franklin. Both are services are provided by we contract with our non-for-profit for the females, and it's Help USA. At the 30th Street, it is DHS staff that is doing it. If it's families with children, then that family with children goes in through PAF. So it depends the family composition, and that based on that is where the clients will go for their intake.
So if an individual, let's assume that is a single male, goes to Bellevue, are they then screened to determine whether or not they classify as a veteran, and then are they sent to a veteran specific shelter, or are they sent to the general population?
So when a client comes in through intake and identifies as being a veteran, we do have the VA on site. And if the person's not there that day, there is a phone number where we can reach the individual. So they are assessed by the VA to determine whether or not they're eligible for any benefits that the VA offers. And then it's at that point, if it's determined that they're not eligible, and I have to say 9 out of 10, they are eligible. If they're not eligible, we work with our partners at SSVF to also see whether or not that individual can assess any benefits through SSVF. So throughout the process, once it's identified, that individual can go to Borden. If not, then they're sent to another location. But throughout our entire intake process, even while whether it's a single male, single female, an adult family, and/or families with children, we do connect with our veterans throughout their stay, their shelter stay.
Can you tell us the number of veteran-specific shelters is for New York City?
So we have Borden Avenue is our veteran-specific shelter that services our single men. We also have dedicated beds at Barbara Kleiman. In the event that there aren't enough beds at Borden, which never happens almost. And we also have Tillery, which services our single women shelter for women who identify as being a veteran. For families with children, while we don't have specific veteran shelters, and largely in part because we want to ensure that we place that family closest to the school where their youngest child attends. So we're not going to have specific shelters identified for our families because we don't want that to be an impediment on a child getting to their school. So for our adult families, which are families without minors, we do have two sites, one that has mental health services on site and the other one doesn't. So which is our Beach Family Residence and Starbright. So both of those adult family residents we use to identify adult family veterans. So we work with all of these providers, and again, helping and reaching our veterans with our partners from HRA, DVS, and SSVF.
So then I guess maybe I asked the question incorrectly. So how many dedicated beds then? Because we don't really have very many. So we have one shelter and a couple of scattered beds elsewhere. So what is the total number of beds set aside for homeless vets?
Singles. For singles?
Yeah, singles.
For singles.
Yeah.
It's Borden Avenue has 254 beds, and we have 100 dedicated beds at our Barbara Kleiman.
Okay. So there's a shelter not too far from where my East Harlem office is, the Veterans Residence. Is that a shelter?
Sorry, what's the name of it?
The Veterans Residence.
I'm sorry, I don't know where you are.
It's in East Harlem. This one is on East 119th Street.
Oh, that is permanent housing.
That's permanent.
Oh, yes, correct. I think it's owned by VOA.
I want to say VOA is the new provider for it. That is permanent housing.
Got you. Okay, thank you for that. Can you explain what your definition of permanent housing is? I know that you guys gave some statistics on the number of individuals that were placed last year, and I'm just wondering, when we say, that people were placed in permanent housing, are we saying that they were placed in an apartment, a single room, a shared space?
So when we say we are placing people into permanent housing, I said that earlier. It's a combination. The grand majority of our residents are placed with a subsidy. So either HUD-VASH, VASH Continuum, SSVF, or City FEPS. And now we also have the new voucher, which is Section 8 EH3. And we also place our veterans in master leasing, where the agency, the other side of DSS, has 395 specific units specifically geared for master leasing. That does not include the veterans residency program that is part of supportive housing. So our veterans, when we say being placed in permanent housing, it is someone that will have an actual lease, whether it be a lease for an apartment or a room, but they have to have a lease in order for us to use a subsidy.
And if in fact it is a room, it is a room for them by themselves, or is it a shared room?
Correct. No,
Correct.
it's you,
Individual.
if
home.
we're going to be using the city FEPS voucher, you have to have a room on your own. It is not shared.
Okay. Of the 341 vets that were placed in subsidized housing, do you know how many were placed with NYCHA or through the Housing Connect, Michelama, the HUD Rash?
You have that right now? We will get back to you to give you the exact breakdown.
Okay. Do we know what the number of veterans seeking services at home-based offices is and what the rate of denial is?
Home base is part of the HRA. And while we know these services are available in the community, because home base is part of them, I don't have the actual number of the veterans that they serve.
Okay.
Speaker, if I may, I would ask that perhaps our colleagues at DVS can maybe speak to placements as well. I think they'll be able to provide some specific data that might be helpful or answer some of your questions as well.
I brought it up because, you know, because it has, the home-based offices were brought up, so I assume that maybe you might have.
Well, in terms of home base, like I said, it's part of HRA, and I know that it's a program that services our 5 boroughs. So anyone that has and is in need in service can apply. But I also know that DVS has a prevention program, and that's why we're saying if DVS wants to elaborate, they have prevention and they have aftercare.
That is correct. And Deputy Speaker, I'm going to pass it over to our Director of Housing and Support Services to talk more about that data.
Thank you.
Great. So you had asked about types of housing placements that veterans were moved into. I do have a breakdown of our data of the 117 veterans that we helped place into housing last year. And this breaks it into Michelama, affordable or supportive. Approximately 22% of the veterans that we house moved into a supportive housing placement. So this could be either through the New York units or even through Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative. A smaller portion of our veterans, it was less than 3%, moved into Michelama and affordable, and everybody else was moved into private market units. Does that help clarify your question about where veterans are going when they're being placed into housing?
Somewhat, but do you happen, you wouldn't happen to have the number of NYCHA, would you?
For the voucher programs, for HUD VASH and VASH Continuum, which it could be either through NYCHA or HPD. Those vouchers are administered through both housing authorities. It's a combined percentage of 64% of our placements were put into with the vouchers. And then in regards to veterans who are residing within NYCHA, if you give me just one moment.
2,800.
Yeah, thank you.
I didn't know you get that so quick, Dana. Sorry.
Okay, so it was mentioned today that we know of at least 5 unhoused veterans that are within the city's radar. Is that a question that is routinely asked when the outreach unit is out there and they're, you know, first point of contact with individuals? Is that a question that has to be asked and is always?
Yes.
So we know.
So
for sure.
when our engagement teams and nonprofit are doing outreach, part of the questionnaire, as I mentioned to Chair Holden, is asking whether you're a veteran. So we rely on the clients letting us know and disclose. And then what happens also, because we have a system, which is the by name or home mission, the database, those information are put in the system, and then the VA goes behind and checks to see if they're a veteran or not, and then verifies them for us. So the first question is asked as part of the intake for our folks coming in through shelter, whether it be families with children, adult family, or single, or if we're engaging you in the community with street outreach.
I mean, that number just seems really low to me. And I you know, when I'm out on the streets, I see people with, you know, posters, and yeah, they kind of cannot maybe be veterans, but they're identifying as such. And so that the fact that we're, you know, that we have 5, that the number happens.
So I want to make it clear, we have 5 unsheltered veterans, which still remain on the street. We have another 49 that we've been able to bring into our system that are part of the street housing division, and they're a part of either in a stabilization bed or a safe haven bed. So 49 are in that low barrier shelters that fall under the street. And then we have 5 that are part of the by name list, that are part of the outreach team that we're trying to engage to bring them in and try to convince them that, you know, we want them to come into shelter.
So out of the 49, were those placements recent? Like, did they happen like last week, in the last 2 weeks?
So it's continuing. It's daily engagement. I will have to get back to you to tell you what days of when they've been coming, but I do know that in our stabilization, in our safe haven, we have 49, and then we have 5 that are unsheltered.
Yeah, I'm telling you that that number doesn't seem right, but I can
Okay.
also kind of predict why it might not be accurate. So with, you know, there's been a lot of controversy as of late regarding the removal of homeless folks from the train stations and from encampments. My understanding is that when outreach workers are out there and they're making contact with unhoused individuals, they usually, especially for specialized beds and for safe havens, there has to be a number of contacts that are made before the person is found or deemed eligible for those types of units. With the ongoing raids and people being displaced and moved from one place to another, are you comfortable in, you know, enough to feel, do you feel that this is going to allow you to do your job to the best of your ability? Because I find it really difficult if we're moving people around that we're going to be able to service them in the way that we intend to service them if we no longer know where they are. The continuity of service, as you know, is vital to get an individual to accept, you know, housing to begin with, which can be a very tedious, you know, process. I mean, we're talking about, you know, it can take upwards up to a year, maybe sometimes I've heard cases with 2 years, but we know that the individual is on X corner every single day. If we move the person, now we're starting the clock all over again. So I would really like to get on record, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I don't know how that is helpful and how that impacts this work.
So the approach that the new administration has been taking is we're doing a collaboration with several city agencies. So I know you're talking about when we're going out there and in engaging folks. It's being done currently now through DHS in partnership with Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, in partnership with NYPD, in partnership with sanitation. As you may know, Speaker Ayala, it takes more than one engagement to try to convince someone to come in the door. So yes, I understand when you say, I go to the corner and you see this person in the corner, we're going to be continuing to go out there. One of the things this administration has made a commitment is opening over 500 beds, of which we last week opened 3 different facilities. And it is for that same reason. We're ready to, when anyone wants to come in their doors, be able to offer them a bed and bring them into our system.
But in all fairness, those three sites that were open last week were commitments that were made through the de Blasio administration, and there has been absolutely no money put into any type of supportive housing in this year's budget. So that concerns me. You know, it's a real concern. And I listen, we're all partners in this, so I don't want, you know, I'm trying to get to, you know, to the bottom line here, because I want to know how we can, what are we doing right, and where can we be doing better? And I just really feel uncomfortable with the way that we are moving folks along. Now, I am not saying that I or anyone on this body condones allowing, you know, individuals to sleep on the street. I happen to know a lot of them by name. I've lost a lot of them on the street that died to hypothermia because they have underlying illnesses that are not being treated. I understand, and I am, you know, completely, you know, in favor of making those contacts and trying to facilitate, you know, the transition to some sort of temporary and eventually permanent housing. However, I think that, you know, you doing, you know, by virtue of, you know, dismantling encampments in the way that we're doing it, we're doing a disservice, you know, to the work that you're trying to do out on the streets, because now you have no idea where John Doe is, because John Doe is no longer there. And we know, because only 5 people have accepted assistance, that John Doe is also not in the shelter system. So where is he? You know, that should be cause for concern. I mean, people should be outraged about that. It is inhumane to do that as well. So oftentimes in government, we're either to the left of something or to the right of something. And, and I find that there's a lot of commonality and, there is a really, really big gray area. And we need to work together in order to ensure that all, unhoused individuals that are out on the street for whatever reason, for substance use disorder, because they have some, mental health issues, because, they lost their job, they lost their apartment, they don't feel safe in a congregate shelter setting, that we are, able to know, to identify them in a way that allows us to better service them. So I'll leave it at that. I know that it isn't, this is not something that, we're going to remedy, and I don't expect you to have, an answer to that, but I really think that it is important as a chair of this committee that that I say that publicly, because it is something that is weighing very heavily on, my mind and on the minds of, every single provider that is out there doing this work, which is difficult to begin with, and we shouldn't be making it harder. With that, I really want to allow, I have a couple of questions regarding the food. So is it that did the city move away from from purchasing raw food and cooking it on site because it was more cost efficient to do it pre-cooked?
So not all our facilities have the ability to cook meals on site. There are some that do have a full kitchen, as Chair Holden has expressed at the Borden Avenue residency. But for the most part, our facilities, what they do is they subcontract the meals, and it is prepackaged, and we have to follow the food standard, which is unfortunately 2,200 calories to be provided throughout the day. In doing so, it is more, the food comes and we warm them up, and then we service them to our clients.
Are these culturally relevant meals,
Yes, ma'am, they are.
Yeah. Okay.
If a client requests a culturally competent meal, we will absolutely serve him or her.
Perfect. Okay. And I have two more questions, and then I'm going to defer to my colleagues because I know that they've been waiting for a while. Can you tell us what the average number of referrals for permanent housing is, and how long the wait list is for those units?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
How many people are being I guess deemed eligible for permanent housing, and how long is that wait list? Like, how long could a person that is in shelter and qualifies, meets all of the guidelines, like how long are they in shelter?
So our veterans is one of the things the administration has done, and we had done previously, and the administration has continued to support. The minute a veteran walks into a door, there is no wait list to qualify for a subsidy. It is the one population that you walk in the door, we can issue you a voucher immediately. There is no 90-day requirement to qualify for a subsidy for a veteran.
Okay. Do we know what services are available to veterans living in supportive housing settings?
Supportive housing, maybe, I'm not sure if DVS would be able to answer that question. I know supportive housing falls on the HRA and they monitor those contracts. So unfortunately, I can't speak 100% of the services supportive housing is providing now.
Okay.
Deputy Speaker, what I'll say is, again, also adding on to your previous question, as we said, veterans have a higher probability of being eligible and access federal subsidies. So one thing we are really proud of is the federal dollars that we bring back into New York City's economy with all our veterans who are eligible for those subsidies. But in addition to that, because they are federal subsidies, they do come with those supportive services through the VA and our nonprofits and ourselves who perform these critical time intervention type of support and engaging with them before, during, and after they are housed permanently. I'm going to pause there, though, and pass it over to our Director of Housing to talk more about that service and the question you had.
Great, thank you, Jason. So to get back to the question about supportive housing, I hope I can provide a little bit of insight into it. I do think it depends on the type of supportive housing that the veteran is moving into, and vets have access to different levels. Earlier, the New York units. We also work with the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, and that has different criteria than New York, where a veteran just needs a disability. It doesn't have to be a mental health, it could be medical or substance. So the case management might be different than a type of supportive housing where it is more geared towards veterans who are chronically homeless or have severe and persistent mental illness. So the degree of support that's offered really depends on the program and the level of supportive housing.
I'm going to assume then that all the providers that are supportive housing units have an expertise in both mental health and substance use disorder.
Yeah, one thing I have to say that supportive housing that is being brought up, it is about depending, not as Dana has said, it depends on, what type of housing. So we have supportive housing that caters or services people with mental illness. We have supportive housing that services people with substance abuse. We have supportive housing unit that are for seniors. So it depends on which supportive housing unit the individual is being found eligible in order to be able to move them into those locations. So those are kind of the supports that come when you're moving them into these type of settings.
Okay, and I'm sorry, really quickly, I'm sorry to the council members that are waiting. I lied a little bit. I didn't mean to, but just two last questions. I'll ask both of them at the same time, so that way you can just get back to me. Of the city FEPS rental assistance voucher recipients, how many veterans have received shopping letters, and how many are utilizing vouchers for permanent housing? And two, can you give us an update on how many veterans were among seniors who benefited from the Elder Rent Assistance Program?
Deputy Speaker, I'll share some of DVS's numbers on this, and this kind of goes into your previous question in that 70% of the veterans that we've worked with utilize some form of supportive housing or supportive rental subsidy. So that means HUD-VASH Continuum, and supportive housing. So only about 30% of our homeless population that we've been working with do not fall into one of those categories. On the city FEPS side, that makes up, at least on our end, one of the lowest populations of veterans who are utilizing those subsidies, which again speaks to how our homeless veteran population is not a significant burden on the tax levy dollars invested in the city. We bring a lot of federal dollars back for this population. I'm really proud of the work we do in collaboration with DHS, HRA, NYCHA, HPD, and the VA and HUD to make sure that they get these eligible benefits that they've earned in their military service. But I'm going to pause there and pass it over to DHS to comment.
And to respond to your question about the shopping letter, as I mentioned earlier, all our veterans, if we are not able to divert them from the front door and move along into our shelters, do qualify for a shopping letter because there is no day requirement. So once they arrive, and if it is, there's an assessment done, and if it is through city FEPS that they're going to be moving out, that's when we're issuing. But as Jason has described, many of our vets qualify for either HUD-VASH or VASH Continuum, and we prioritize them for those type of subsidies.
But do we know what the number of shopping letters is in the universe today?
So what I want to say is we have 300, close to 400 individuals. All of them are eligible for a shopping letter.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay, and the last question was on the seniors.
I'm sorry, Deputy Speaker, what was that?
The last question was, unless you wanted to add something else to that, the last question was an update on the veterans who were seniors who benefited from the Elder Rent Assistance Program announced by the de Blasio administration in 2017.
Before I pass that over to DHS, I do want to add that from our perspective, and I'll let the Director of Housing speak more on this, and as the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, we do drive our veterans who are eligible for the federal subsidy to that subsidy because it is more sustainable. It's not a one-year program. It's ongoing, so it is more sustainable for the longevity of their health and welfare. So just another reason why there may be a lower proportion of vets that do utilize city FEPS, but like the Deputy Commissioner said, they're all eligible regardless. So I'll pause there and pass it over to DHS regarding your question in the senior rental.
So the elderly rental assistance program that you're referencing that de Blasio announced in 2017 was continued from our understanding from a proposed mansion tax that the state was opposed to. It never passed, so that program never also materialized.
Was there an alternative identified?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay. I'm done with questions. Councilmember Holden? Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And before I turn it over to my colleagues, I have one question. Is it true that the Borden Avenue shelter once provided every client with a module and that DHS took many of them down several years ago when the VA money ceased?
At one point, I want to say yes, the whole facility was had modules. The reason why, I would have to get back to you. I don't know why they now we have two different programs or two different settings.
Yeah, because I don't think it's a good idea that DHS has, two separate categories of veterans, federal veterans and city veterans, because that's what they're doing now. So we need to change that and give everybody a module. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues and for their questions for the administration. I'd like to say that we will be limiting council member questions and answers to 5 minutes. The Sergeant at Arms will keep the timer and let you know when your time is up. So back to Aminta, our moderator.
Thank you, Chair Holden. I will now call on council members who have questions. Again, if you can, please use the Zoom raise hand function and I will call on you in the order in which your hand is raised. So we will begin now with Councilmember Palladino.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. I want to commend my chairman, Councilmember Holden, and also Ayala. I can't thank you enough for putting this together. I want to start by saying how terribly disappointed I am in the Department of Veterans Services. Stats that were not able to be given to us today is a disgrace. We asked for numbers that you should know right off the top of your head, and the fact that you can't is appalling to me. To chime in, let me take a sidebar. We're talking about 279 people. We're not talking about 2,079,000 people. That how can you lose, how come you don't have numbers for this? How is it possible that our veterans are being fed dog food, absolute dog food, at the one main homeless shelter that you have that member Holden went and visited on Saturday, which I can't wait to go to. This is an outrage to me, absolute outrage. What is the budget for the Department of Veterans Services? How much money is allotted to this department? Does anybody have an answer for that?
Hi, Chair. Yes, as Assistant Commissioner of Department of Veteran Services, our total budget is $6 million.
Ha! $6 million. $6 million what? You didn't finish? Give me the rest of it.
$6 million, a little bit over $6 million.
Oh, a little over 6 million. And okay.
4 million of that is
$6 million.
dedicated to our personnel.
That $6 million is taking care of how many people? 279? 400? What's the number? Because I'm looking at papers here that quote 2013, 2015. What's happening now in 2021, 2020? Where is this money? Where is this money going? How much of this money goes to payroll? How much of this money goes to payroll to pay your salaries? How much does our veterans actually see out of this money? And there's got to be a hell of a lot more, as Diana had said, than 200 or 300 people that are homeless, veterans that are homeless, veterans that are facing mental illness, drug addiction, alcoholism. How are these people being treated? How are my Vietnam veterans being treated? Very poorly at best. This is a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. I'm very disappointed in today's meeting, and I can't, the Veterans Committee, Chairman Holden and myself feel very strongly about this. I'm going to speak for you, Bob. I'm sorry, but we've got to get to the bottom of this because this is wasteful spending, and I'm going to call on an audit. I want this department audited because this is ridiculous. This is absolutely, we've been on now. It is 10 minutes of 3. And I've listened to departments bounce back and forth and hand it over to this one, who handed it over to that one, who handed it over to this one. No, I'm a bottom line type of person. I want bottom lines. And you know what? You people can't supply us with bottom lines. You knew this meeting was happening today. Why weren't you better prepared?
Councilwoman, what I just want to iterate that our budget is dedicated to the 250,000 plus veterans in New York City.
Okay.
The DHS has oversight of our shelter systems, and we work in collaboration with them to deliver services to those 276 that you're referencing. But we are happy to work with you and the rest of council to address any of those concerns that you've brought up to us today, and we will be getting you back the data that was requested today.
How do you explain the food that Councilmember Holden held up? How do you explain that? How do you explain that our vet and you say 250,000? So out of 250,000, answer me this: why are there only 279 of them in shelters? Okay, that's like 1%. Come on, you could do better than that. This is absurd. This is absurd.
Well,
Councilmember Ariola, do you have what to say?
Councilwoman, I would like to add that the Department of Veteran Services since July 2020 has partnered with the Governor's Office and HelloFresh to donate 2,000 fresh meal kits per week to veterans and active service members. And since July 2020, we are proud to share that we've delivered over 200,000 meals utilizing the HelloFresh partnership. That's thanks to the Black Vets for Social Justice and Wendy McClinton and her team as well. So we are familiar with the food assistance requests and the needs of our community, and we deliver on those needs when they're brought to our attention.
Well, I know a lot of very unhappy veterans. Something else I'd like to ask you about. What does it mean to have Purple Heart status? What are the advantages? And what is the Purple Heart status? How many programs does that, give to our veterans? How many are there? How many Purple Heart recipients are there in the state and the city of New York? What leverage does that have for the veterans that qualify? I'm interested to know.
Councilwoman, Purple Heart status is reflective of those who are awarded a Purple Heart.
I know what don't. I know what you mean, what a Purple Heart means. I'm asking you, what does the Purple Heart status mean for every veteran that has received the Purple Heart? What is the Purple Heart status? How do they benefit by it? Do they qualify for additional services because they're going to fall underneath the Purple Heart status? What is it?
Yeah, it is an expansion of benefits. Those that we can
elaborate.
Well, I can get back to you on the very specific details, but it's broad, and I'm not sure what you're comparing it to as well. Are you comparing it to a veteran who does not have a Purple Heart? Is that what you're?
No, I'm just curious. We're going to have it passed. It's up there in Albany, and we're going to have the governor sign off on it. I just would like to know, what Purple Heart status means, and who's going to be, how many recipients are there, and what does that qualify them for? That's all. Simple question.
Understood. Obviously, we value the sacrifice of our Purple Heart recipients, and we're going to review that resolution, and we're going to review the resolution, and we can provide more of those details and data that you're requesting today.
Terrific. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Councilmember Palladino. Now going to call on Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Ariola. Over to Councilmember Brewer.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. One is, this is something that goes back to Lori Sutton when she was head of the agency. Why is it not possible to find out from the Marines? My husband is a vet from Vietnam, so I'm very familiar with how they operate. The Marines, Air Force, et cetera, who is being discharged to the city of New York so that people don't end up in the shelter system. And we've never been able to do that. So I want to know if you are thinking along those lines, sort of preventive. Number two, I want to understand Mitchell Lamas. I passed a bill years ago that gives veterans preference for Mitchell Lama housing. So I don't know if anybody's taking advantage of that. And number three, at 330 West 95th Street, you have 135 veterans permanently housed. That's thanks to me, I have to be honest with you. And I wanted to know if there are other efforts that you're making, because people, I'll be honest with you, want to have veterans in their community. So if you say we have a building, we have funding, we want, we've got hotels all over the place. What are we doing to purchase these hotels for our veterans? So those are my three questions, so we can replicate 330 West 95th Street.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for those questions. And I'll start by addressing your first question regarding preventative care. We are working with the DoD and the federal government to get access to lists of those transitioning veterans that are coming and returning to New York City as their home of residence. That list is known as the RONA list. We are utilizing that list and kind of partnering it with kind of our previous efforts and our Mission Vet Check initiative. Our Mission Vet Check was a partnership with the Mayor's Office for Community Mental Health to make phone supportive calls to veterans to have a conversation with them, but to also educate them on the benefits and resources that they're eligible for here in New York City. So with that effort, we called over 35,000 households. We want to continue that approach to performing outreach, to continue to educate these veterans of their benefits that they're eligible for. So as far as preventative, that's one measure. We also have an aftercare prevention team. I'm turning it over to Director of Housing and Support Services to talk more about that aftercare model and that critical time intervention.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. So we do have an aftercare and support model that follows veterans 2 years after they moved out. So we start within a week of them moving out, we check in with them. They've worked with the veteran peer coordinator throughout the process to get housed. And so it's really important that we provide that critical time intervention once they up to 6 months, then again at 10 months.
Hey, Dana, I think
You're breaking up, Dana.
Director Rock, sorry to interrupt, but at this point, I think you're.
Dana.
We can't hear you, Dana. We can't hear you.
Close them out.
Can't hear you, Dana. Dana, we can't hear you.
At this point, we're just going to move on from Director Rock. Yes, we've I think there was a bit of a delay.
We can't hear you, Dana, so somebody else should take over.
So I could talk a little bit about the last piece where you had mentioned, Councilmember Brewer, about the 95th Street. Yes, it is a master leasing, and thank you very much. We worked along to get that with your assistance into permanent housing where it is all geared towards veteran. Something that the administration is looking forward is how we could continue, as you said, into that. And I want to say that because of this program, we have others. In total, we have 395 permanent housing that fall under specific veterans in 11 different contracts. All of them are within HRA, but we continue to build on that partnership to try to bring additional buildings that we could convert into master leasing.
Okay. Are you going to give us a list of the buildings that you're trying? Because I got a long list of hotels that are available.
We would definitely, it's under HRA, so I'm sorry. a master leasing and supportive housing all fall under our sister agency, which is HRA. So I'm pretty sure if you want to share a list with us, we can make it get to their way, but they're constantly looking, and it's something that is very close and dear to our heart, and how we can expand on this program.
All right, and then what about Mitchell Lamas? Who's in charge of getting folks into Mitchell Lamas?
So I think that's where Dana was trying to get the information and is having difficulties with her audio.
All right, can she send it to the committee?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me now?
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Great, thank you. So Mitchell Lama does still offer the preference for eligible veterans, and that is in both city and state-run developments in the Mitchell Lama lotteries. Once a qualified veteran is selected in the lottery, they're placed at the top of an external wait list, and they're given preference when a unit becomes available. Something that we do at DVS, we've partnered with HPD. Whenever a wait list or a lottery is getting ready to open, they send us the advertisement and we push it out in our weekly newsletter. So every time we know that a wait list is opening, we try to push that out to our veterans in the community. And that includes both homeless veterans and those who are stably housed and are just looking to move into.
Do you know how many veterans have taken advantage of it and gotten into Mitchell Lama?
I'd have to get back to you on the number from HPD
Okay,
and
then-
HDR.
And I just would suggest that you tell not just your newsletter, but everybody, because it is a great opportunity.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. It's a good bill, by the way, and it is permanent, and it is a bill, and it is the law. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer, for your questions. Over now to Councilmember Ariola.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Speaker Ayala. And thank you to all my colleagues who have spoken. I echo all of your concerns. But I'm especially appalled at a statement that was made earlier in the hearing, where when Councilmember Holden held up a very small package of food, you said, I believe it was either Sonia or Iris said that they are able to get another portion if available. If available. So we're having them congregately live, which is so demeaning and demoralizing. And now when they ask for some more of a very small portion that would not fill a child, it's only available if there is more. Do you hear yourselves? You are failing the homeless population. You are failing the veterans who are homeless. You are failing. Your department is failing. And you're treating people like less than human, which will not be tolerated by this body. And I think that became very evident during this hearing. We need to legislate, my colleagues, we need to legislate so that we can make sure that DHS is doing the right thing by our veterans who fought for our freedoms. And I can go into all the different cliches regarding veterans, but the fact of the matter is that they're being so poorly treated, and they'd rather be on the street than be in one of the veterans' homes. What does that tell you?
So
no, I don't have a question, because I know you couldn't answer any question that's been posed yet. So my question is to my colleagues, and I ask you, please, let's really dive into this and let's find out why, because each and every one of us go to veterans groups and tell them how much we care about them. Now it's time to show them. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Ariola. I am now going to make one final call for any additional council members who have further questions. If you can please use the Zoom raise hand function. Otherwise, I will turn it now back over to Chair Holden before moving on to public testimony.
Thank you, Committee Council. And again, I want to thank the administration for their testimony. We have a lot of work to do for our veterans, and certainly I urge all my colleagues to visit the Borden Avenue shelter to see for themselves as to what I'm talking about in the way of housing. Those modules should come back. I think the whole board and shelter should be made up of modules. Our veterans deserve that, and fresh food should be cooked there. That's the least we can do, folks, at DHS. That's the least we can do for them, and certainly find them supportive housing and permanent housing. But while they're at Borden, we should treat them the way they deserve to be treated. And when I went there, they weren't. And there were a lot of complaints about the cleanliness of the bathrooms and other things, but we have a debt to pay to our veterans, and that veterans shelter at Borden is not doing the job. So I asked that DHS put 100% modules in there and cook fresh food there. And I as chair of the Veterans Committee, I will work toward that and do it as quickly as possible. And I'll certainly get Mayor Adams there to tour that, because I know he feels the same way I do. So again, I want to thank the administration, and I'll turn it over to our moderator to call on members of the public to testify. I want to thank my colleagues also. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Holden, and thank you to members of the administration. I also want to turn it over to Deputy Speaker Ayala before we move on to public testimony, if you'd like to offer any remarks before we excuse the administration.
No, I want to just say thank you, for being here today. I think, again, we're partners in this, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think that, it behooves all of us to try to figure out how to work collaboratively, how to include all voices in the conversation so that we're successful. I think at the end of the day, right, we all have a mandate to ensure that people that deserve and need resources in this city receive them with dignity. I agree in terms of the meal allotment. I understand that there's a specific mandate, but I think that mandate, right, is not sufficient to meet the nutritional needs of grown men. So I am pretty sensitive to that as well. And I think that if there's a way that we can kind of try to figure that out, and I get that the challenges of congregate meal settings are not always appropriate, but we have to figure out a better alternative for that. We're seeing the same issues, across the board in our schools and our senior centers. And I think as we move to a supposedly healthier, model, we're also wasting a lot of the city's resources. A lot of money goes wasted on food that is trashed because people either, don't recognize it, don't like it. And so I think it's actually more cost efficient to draft a plan that includes the recommendations of the people that are actually eating the food. So thank you for being here today, and thank you, Councilmember Holden. And hopefully we can move along collectively. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ayala, and thank you to members of the administration. We are now going to move on to public testimony. As a reminder, all public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. After I call your name, please wait a brief moment for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. And please note that panelists will be able to register for this hearing until the hearing is closed. The first public panel will be in the following order: Andy Perdomo, Adam Warrenick, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, Adam, and finally Kevin Meggitt. We will begin now with Andy Perdomo.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Perdomo, and I am the Director of Specialized Housing and Veteran Initiative with Volunteers of America, Greater New York. We are the local affiliate of the national organization Volunteers of America, Inc. I would like to thank Chair Holden and Chair Ayala, as well as the other members of this committee, for the opportunity to submit the following testimony. VOAGNY is an anti-poverty organization that aims to end homelessness in Greater New York by 2050 through housing, health, and wealth building services. We are one of the region's largest human services providers, impacting more than 11,000 adults and children annually through 65 programs in New York City, Northern New Jersey, and Westchester. We are also active not-for-profit developer of supportive housing and affordable housing with a robust portfolio of award-winning permanent supportive housing and senior housing properties, with more in the pipeline. First, We at VOAGNY would like to thank Sheriffs Holden and Ayala and members of this committee for holding this hearing. Volunteers of America has a long history of serving our city's veterans through a variety of programs and residents, with many cumulative years of experience with this population among our staff. We operate a number of permanent supportive housing residents for veterans and provide a number of services at these locations and elsewhere. We are also one of the providers of supportive services for veterans and family in the city, connecting veterans with services in the areas of rapid rehousing and homeless prevention, housing placements, and aftercare. We also participate in the New York City Continuum of Care Bed Task Force. The citywide effort to functionally end veteran homelessness has led to great progress towards this goal. To use our own programs as an example, at a number of our residents, where there are beds or units set aside for veterans, referral for that population has slowed down tremendously. In some cases, this has led to the organizing of filling veterans units with general population clients. Dwindling referrals of veterans experiencing homelessness and needing housing placement is a sign of great progress of this issue. However, this does not mean that we, as providers and advocates, can claim mission accomplished. The veteran population remains housing insecure, often facing extremely high level of rent burden, and one emergency away from falling into rental arrears and experiencing homelessness again. Individuals and families do not always qualify for traditional rental assistance programs, particularly when there is no underlying social service need. We as advocates and as city need to look beyond the success of ending functional veteran homelessness and keep in mind the precarious nature of housing for this population.
Time expired.
There's still need for flexible and creative rental assistance solution, like the one offered. I'm muted.
You can keep going.
Okay. There is still need for flexible and creative rental assistance solution, like the one offered through the SSVF known as the shallow subsidy. A subsidy created for veterans who are not eligible for traditional rental assistance, but however, are still experience rental burden, as well as for financial assistance and employment opportunities to address the root issue of low income in a high cost city. Finally, we need to be developing and preserving more affordable housing overall. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Andy, for your testimony. I am now going to call on Adam Warenick for testimony.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Since 1978, Services for the Underserved has provided services for people in and around New York City whose lives have been unsettled by circumstances beyond their control. Our mission is to drive scalable solutions to transform the lives of people with disabilities, people in poverty, and people facing homelessness, solutions that contribute to righting societal imbalances. Our uniqueness lies in our ability to take what we learn on the ground and use it to change systems and impact policy. By delivering high-quality services that address the complex circumstances of each person, we help transform lives, improve neighborhoods, and boost future generations. SUS is a nonprofit leader in housing and supportive services for low-income New Yorkers living with disabilities. We are proud to use our expertise to deliver high-quality, trauma-informed supports to our nation's veterans. We'd like to thank the City Council for its ongoing support of the New York City Department of Veterans Services, DVS, a key partner in the effort to end homelessness among veterans in our city. SUS calls for continued New York City investment in DVS and expanding the housing placement and peer support resources of this agency to bolster its capabilities across our increasingly expensive rental market. The New York City Department of Veterans Services HUD-VASH Continuum has been a lifeline to permanent housing for many veterans who historically do not qualify for federal VHA services. DVS staff have been strong partners across our continuum of care through this project, where they actively participate in community case conferencing and barrier busting to support homeless veterans' access to permanent housing. SUS's programs partner closely with numerous other city agencies to identify, engage, and serve homeless and at-risk veterans across the 5 boroughs. Another department which embraces a collaborative approach to the mission of ending veteran homelessness is the Adult Families, Veterans, and Special Services Department of DHS. We strongly encourage the City Council to support expanding these services to prioritize access for all homeless veterans to emergency resources and housing aid. I'd like to thank NYCHA and HPD, who have also been critical. SCUS asks the City Council to support our outreach priorities for veterans in New York City by identifying all women and families with children who served in the U.S. Armed Forces who are in the New York City homeless system, by supporting access to SSVF, DVS, and other core services for unsheltered and street homeless veterans as soon as they are identified. Bolster access to services for low-income families in the New York City DOE system, helping to ensure that military and veteran families who are facing eviction and homelessness are connected to our existing prevention resources at home base, SSVF, DVS, and legal aid partners. And enhance resources to support and peer support for LGBTQ veterans, many of whom have faced resistance and barriers for housing in the past.
Time expired.
The city should continue to support home-based prevention aid, a policy that not only works, but makes good fiscal sense. We need to support continued veterans aftercare support, and we ask the City Council to recognize the importance of meaningful employment as a core component to veterans recovery and support veterans' access to career opportunities within the city. Lastly, the continued shortages of safe, affordable, permanent housing remain a barrier to reducing and effectively ending veteran homelessness in our city. Veterans' preference and financial incentives for landlords to house homeless veterans is needed in all New York City low-income and market-rate housing units. We ask the City Council to continue to support policies that prioritize homeless veterans for all housing in the city, and to consider further support for set-aside units for homeless veterans in our system. SCUS remains a strong partner in the citywide efforts to end homelessness among veterans. We're confident that with the continued support of our key government partners, the commitment of our City Council, and the leadership of the Adams administration, that New York City will continue to deliver excellent supports to veterans in need, and collectively will ensure that any veteran experiencing homelessness will be able to find and keep a home that meets their needs, preferences, and long-term housing stability goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for your testimony. We will now move to Kevin Meggitt for testimony.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm testifying.
Kevin, we're having some difficulty hearing you. You sound very far away.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm testifying on behalf of myself. I'm a war veteran of the Persian Gulf, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and Desert Storm. It's been very refreshing listening to City Council trying to combat the homeless crisis. However, the homeless crisis, the issue is, in order to attack homelessness, you got to get to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem, genuinely is that of gentrification. And so veterans are being gentrified out of a picture that they rightfully belong in. And until we could address gentrification as that being a problem, and on a federal level, there's no rent regulation federally, or at least it doesn't appear to be, because people are being displaced. We didn't have this problem 20, 30 years ago. So we got to ask, what has happened? And there's a lot of urban renewal, and we're looking at people of color being removed in that process. So that's on a federal level. On a state level and the city level, I really think these vouchers, and I'm not talking about HUD-VASH at this particular time, but the link vouchers and the other vouchers, they sort of need to be, is homelessness just a New York City problem, or is it part of a New York State problem as well? And the city and state can do a better job working with one another to make sure that a city voucher could be honored perhaps in a state. In so many cases, veterans are saying the voucher isn't enough. It's barely enough to cover the rent, but that's because you're in New York City. But if you took that same voucher to, say, Rochester or Buffalo, let the state also bear some of the blame as it comes to homelessness. It should be a shared responsibility. Veterans, in my humblest opinion, should be in a protective class. We've made the sacrifice. I signed a contract willing to pay up to my life for the liberties that everyone is now enjoying. And until you take corporate plutocracy out of homelessness, it's going to always thrive. You can't have capitalism, and capitalism eats poverty. And so we act like poverty doesn't exist, but what's happening, it's getting broader and wider, and no one's addressing the real issue. The other issue is Borden Avenue. We need to start looking at veterans services, helping veteran services. If I had a veteran service that catered towards other vets, we wouldn't have a problem as it pertains to treatment or maltreatment, because veterans really know how to take care of other veterans. The problem is you have non-vets that don't know nothing about veterans or veteran services making decisions, and they're not bringing us to the table. And lastly, and I thank you for the leeway, there's no welcome sign in New York City that says, hey, welcome to New York. On 42nd Street, there should be a big billboard that says, welcome to New York, vet. If you need services, come here. So I would like to see City Council put more than just $2.1 million towards veteran issues. That's less than minimum wage for the amount of population we have. I yield. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for your testimony, and to this entire panel for your testimony. I'll turn it over to Chair Holden if you have any remarks or questions for this panel.
Thank you, Kevin, for that excellent testimony. And you're right, we should have certainly a welcome sign and a lot more service for our veterans. And we're going to work on that in this committee. And I know Deputy Speaker Ayala will also do that. And I want to thank this group. Again, Kevin and the rest of the panelists, please reach out to my office if you have some suggestions, specific suggestions how we address this. And Kevin, did you ever stay at or know people that have stayed at Borden?
Yes, I did, and it's very problematic all the way around. What they don't also tell you is that there's a gang culture in Borden Avenue as well. I know veterans that have come home that are not allowed to have police contact, that has gotten into issues where a fight has scuffled or has happened, and the person left because if the cops are called, they violate their parole, they go back to jail. And matter of fact, I know a gentleman that just got housed 2 or 3 days ago under that situation. And he was actually street homeless. The numbers of homelessness is way higher than there's no such thing as functional zero. That's an oxymoron. When you see street homeless people, 1 in every 4 people that you see in New York City that are street homeless have served this country. And shame on anyone that totes around functional zero.
Thank you for that. All right, back to committee council.
Thanks again to this panel. I'll now call on our next panel. Our next panel will be in the following order: Wendy McClinton, Deborah Berkman, and Coco Culhane. And we will begin now with Wendy McClinton.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone in your respective roles, and thank you for this opportunity to testify today. As you know, I lead a great organization in Brooklyn called Black Veterans for Social Justice. I'm also the chair of the New York City Veterans Advisory Board. As such, I can assure you that veterans are core members of our city's neighborhood and communities. They represent people who succeed and struggle like anyone else, but are categorized by toughness and a confidence to solve problems. They don't run away from a fight. I ask you to please consider how veterans can be a part of the city's fabric to channel their skills and suggestions into the structure of our city's new administration. As a veteran and a former homeless veteran, My biggest concern is that New York City does not have a commitment to include veterans as part of its fabric. It's not veteran friendly. There is verbal support when Memorial and Veterans Day come around or when we march in parades, but there isn't an appreciation that we kept this country safe from threats foreign and domestic. I won't deny that these are public relations concerns, but not only New York City, but New York State is a beacon for all people in the United States, and being more welcoming to veterans and their families sends a tone of acceptance and openness to residents and tourists alike. Affirmations to veterans would send a positive message and reach deeply into neighborhoods where they live to convey appreciation and a sense of inclusiveness, which would encourage active civic participation and connect veterans to resources, thereby reducing veteran homelessness. On March 25th, 2021, I was elected chairperson of the New York City Veterans Advisory Board. As chairperson of the Veterans Advisory Board, I clearly see issues that affect veterans and how the city deals with them. This starts with the need for more accountability and action from city agencies. While the Department of Veterans Services has grown annually from $3.8 million in fiscal year 2017 to $6.2 in fiscal year 2022, there is a need for better interagency collaboration and accountability from other city agencies DVS interacts with to ensure results. The VAB, the Veterans Advisory Board, listens to and hears reports on multiple veteran issues, including medical and mental health, business, aging, transportation, homelessness, social services, housing, and family support, especially during the time of transition from military to civilian status. Improving coordination would reduce veteran homelessness and strengthen their family and their structures. I respectfully recommend you consider either legislation or an executive order that calls for representatives of city agencies with direct policy experience to be a part of the Veterans Advisory Board. This includes the Office of Mental Health, which can help with housing and services, the Agency for Children's Services, Health and Hospitals Corporation, the Department of the Aging for our senior services, the Human Resource Administration, the Department of Social Services, Housing Preservation and Development, the Department of Homeless Services, and the Small Business Services. They can produce training, employment opportunities, and other things for our veterans. This doesn't have to be another bureaucracy, but rather programmatic accountability to answer questions and follow through with programmatic results. This connection here is a formal memorandum of understanding between the city and the federal government, connecting the VAB and connecting DVS with representatives from the United States Department of Veteran Affairs and the Veterans Administration. While there currently is a satisfactory connection with the VA's medical services, there is inadequate communication in areas of homelessness, housing, and other much needed services. In essence, it's a one-way street. As a result, there is weakened communication between two critical players that can address veterans' concerns, and even more so now with the proposed closing of several VA medical facilities in New York City and the suggested budget cuts to DVS. This reinforced board or representation would be the best way to structurally change veteran services in New York City. Agency representatives attached to the VAB in collaboration with DVS would ensure better accountability. This would create superior outreach, better marketing of VA services, and assist with the very many services needed by family members and veterans and their caregivers. This suggested small change in how we collaborate and communicate will result in better services given to our city's veterans, their families, and the community, and set New York City on a path of veteran wellness. Thank you for your attention to veteran issues during the developmental phase of your administration. Black Veterans for Social Justice, the New York City Veterans Advisory Board, stand ready to work with you to improve the quality and level of services for all New Yorkers, especially our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Wendy. I'll now call on Deborah Berkman for testimony.
Time starts now.
Chair Holden, Deputy Speaker Ayala, council members and staff, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on the committees on veterans and general welfare on veteran homelessness in New York City. My name is Deborah Berkman, and I'm the coordinating attorney of the Shelter Advocacy Initiative at NILAG. The Shelter Advocacy Initiative provides legal services and advocacy to people experiencing homelessness in New York City, and NILAG also hosts a specifically veteran-focused practice. Many of our clients experiencing homelessness are veterans of the armed forces and have had particular barriers accessing Department of Homeless Services or DHS shelter. Many of NILAG's veteran clients suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD resulting from their time in the military. And many of my clients experiencing PTSD just cannot access shelter because they cannot navigate DHS's intake process. DHS's intake process can take up to 2 days, with most of that time spent waiting in crowded rooms. Clients are often not fed and not able to take essential medications. Clients report that staff at the intake centers are verbally aggressive and demeaning towards shelter applicants. Clients with disabilities are not accommodated, especially those with mental health disabilities. And many of my clients report that DHS police at the intake centers are physically aggressive. As a result, I have met with many veteran clients experiencing street homelessness who were willing to go into shelter, but could not make it through the intake process. One of those clients, Mr. T, was a veteran who suffered extreme PTSD from his time in combat. Mr. T's PTSD was triggered by being in tight spaces and in crowded environments. He and his partner were discovered sleeping outside in Manhattan and were brought by Homeless Outreach Team to DHS Intake Center. While in the crowded intake center, Mr. T began to experience flashbacks and extreme anxiety, leading him to react by raising his voice and screaming. DHS staff would not allow the homeless outreach worker to de-escalate the situation. And in the subsequent escalation, a DHS police officer ended up punching Mr. T in the face, even though he had not shown any physical aggression. Mr. T then fled the intake center and him and his partner returned to the street. DHS must amend its intake process so that it is accessible to veterans with mental illness. And to that end, all intake staff should be trained in trauma-informed practices and de-escalation. Clients who self-identify as having disabilities should be awarded immediate provisional accommodation so they can get through the intake process. Additionally, as Chairs Ayala and Holden and others have pointed out, many of my veteran clients who identify as having PTSD are afraid to sleep in a room with multiple other people around them. And unfortunately, most of DHS single adult shelters consist of congregate shelters where there can be up to 100 people in a room. This is not an appropriate setting for our veterans or really for any person experiencing homelessness. DHS must expand its inventory of single and double rooms to meet the mental health needs of veterans with PTSD.
Expired.
I will be submitting more fulsome comments in writing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deborah, for your testimony and for submitting the rest of your testimony via written testimony. I will now turn to Coco Culhane for testimony.
Time starts now.
Hi, I'm Coco Culhane, the Executive Director of the Veteran Advocacy Project. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We focus on working with veterans who have post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and substance use issues. I was surprised at how little substance use was discussed, as well as discharge status. I heard DHS mention it, but those are the two highest predictors for homelessness among veterans, and seem like they need to be a stronger focus. And I do want to say that I think the city has done an incredible job in terms of reducing veteran homelessness 90%, and it shows that if there's the political will, we should be able to do it for every population. But it seems like we stalled out once we sort of declared victory with chronic homelessness. And every year somebody comes and testifies about the 3 or 5 or 7 street homeless veterans that there are. And every year I say it's ludicrous. While that was being said, I reached out to our intake advocate and asked if he could tell me how many in the last month. Veterans are not, most veterans anyway, are not, sitting on street corners. They have survival skills. We have veterans sleeping in cars. We have veterans who do not appear, I think everyone has this sort of idea of identifying a homeless person. We have vets with their backpacks on the subway, and they're not identifying as homeless. So I just wish that everyone would stop sort of, we've maybe say it differently. We have encountered 5 street homeless veterans because there are just so many else out there. There's also, the Adams administration is doing all these clearings of encampments. Who's screening for vets? News reports have shown that out of hundreds of individuals, only 5 have entered shelter. I'm not sure if that's accurate at this point, but this is something DVS could do. Where is the outreach? There are very likely to be vets in a lot of these individual places. And then I also just want to echo what was said by Deborah Berkman about the entrance process in the shelter system, and that we seem to require vets to be sort of with PTS to be tortured before we can get them a voucher. And we're working on reasonable accommodations right now to prevent individuals from having to enter the shelter system and still be able to get various vouchers and subsidies. So I would hope that there could be a clearer system to accommodate those individuals and make sure that they don't have to be triggered in order to seek assistance. So many of our clients say they will not go anywhere near. Right now, we have one client who was actually sexually assaulted in a shelter and has been in her car for over a year, maybe 2 years. And I know we are working with TDS on that to hopefully get around the system, but it shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't be traumatizing to enter shelter.
Time expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coco, for your testimony, and thank you to this entire panel. I'll turn it over to Chair Holden for any remarks or questions.
Well, again, thanks for this expert panel. Wendy McClinton, the chair of the Veterans Advisory Board, magnificent job that she does, and so many other organizations that you volunteer, Wendy. We certainly appreciate you. I know you're at every press conference concerning veterans, and Chuck Schumer's press conference, where obviously we're addressing closing the veterans hospitals, which is totally ridiculous. But that from time to time that happens, and they do it, and we will have to beat it back again. And certainly, Deborah, thank you so much for your testimony, and you're absolutely right. Deborah Berkman does a magnificent job, in that area, obviously, and representing the homeless veterans. And certainly, Coco, we need to talk more because you have so many ideas, and obviously, you're seeing on the veterans, the ones that are falling through the cracks, and we need to know who they are and try to help them. And my committee will do that, and certainly I will. So let's keep in touch. But thank you all, very, very 3 powerful people, advocates for veterans, and thank you so much. Back to you, Committee Counsel.
Thank you, Chair Holden. I'll now turn to our next panel, which will be comprised of Tawaki Komatsu.
Time starts now.
Hi, Tawaki. I'm not sure if you're speaking, but I can't hear you. Tawaki, it seems like your audio is not working for some reason. I don't know if you have headphones, which you could use potentially. Oh, now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Right. But I am part of the Fair Hearing Unit. I understand that. And in that vein, I will assist you in making sure that your stuff at the job center gets pushed through. But also, that is what I mean. You take this one sentence. But even setting that any person, even setting that aside, Mr. Banks told me to talk to you about NTT the last time I saw him. I saw him on March 28th. I specifically asked him about NTT. He told me to talk to you. I told him what exactly? About NTT data, meaning I talked to Mr. Banks on July 19th in Kew Gardens. He told me that he would look into the matter. He has not. I never received a response once. So I don't know what NTT, what that part of that is. That wasn't litigated. It's still being litigated. Your order should show cause, and that was.
So here's the thing. Next week, I have a hearing against this company called NTT Data. It's still subjecting me to wage theft dating back to 2012. all of you are paying for that contract. So Mr. Holden, you asked about how can you help veterans? Can you pressure HRA to terminate that contract immediately? And I guess watch that oral arguments hearing on April 12th. Thanks for your time and condolences to your mom about your mom. Thanks.
Thank you, Tawaki. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Tawaki, and thank you to everyone who testified before this hearing today. At this point, if we have inadvertently missed anyone that would like to testify, you can please use the Zoom raise hand function now, and we will call you in the order in which your hand is raised. All right, seeing none, we have now concluded public testimony for this hearing. I now turn to Chair Holden for any closing remarks and to close out the hearing.
Thank you so much, Aminta. I just want to thank everyone, Deputy Speaker Ayala, the administration, my colleagues, veteran groups, and advocates for your contributions today. Many thanks to the Veterans Committee and General Welfare Committee staff for their hard work in making this hearing possible. It's now 3:40. This hearing is hereby adjourned. Thank you.